You are listening to the Breaktime Tech Talks podcast, a bite-sized tech podcast for busy developers, where we'll briefly cover technical topics, news snippets, and more in short time blocks. I'm your host, Jennifer Reif, an avid developer and problem solver with special interest in data, learning, and all things technology. I'm testing a new microphone today. Let's see how this goes. As with everything, there are positives and negatives. I've had a few questions recently about what developer advocates do and whether I enjoy it, and I often rattle off a few random bits in response. Today, I'll hit the highlights, the good, the bad, the meh parts, to hopefully give you a perspective from many different angles. Then I'm a bit of a geek about data and databases, if you haven't already learned by now. And I was excited to learn a little bit more about Cypher and upcoming features in this blog I talk about today. First, let's talk about developer advocacy. I always, when somebody asks me, do you want the good news or the bad news first? I always start with the bad news. Let's start there so we can end on a high note. First off, though, I want to add a disclaimer. I love my job. The tech, the content, the people, both that I meet and work with. I love being a developer advocate. This feels like a place that I'm challenged, I can learn, I enjoy. Now, it's not to say that there's not some struggles, even with things that I love, but overall, I consider this a high net positive for the job. Let's start with the bad news. First is it's very easy to get overwhelmed as a developer advocate. It's easy to take on too much, to try to help out too much, or to do too many tasks. There are so many opportunities coming at developer advocates, at least from my position and where we are right now, and lots of different types of tasks. Hey, can you add to this? Can you contribute here? Can you respond to this? Can you pick up and review this? Can you this and that? You have to pick and choose what you can produce high quality results on, what is the most impactful for your job, because after all, developer advocates are here to help other developers learn technology and improve their solutions and their understanding of things. That means that I have to pick and choose the tasks that are most helpful to my audience, that are the highest impact to those people and help them do things better. Now, the other thing that can be good, can be bad, a double-edged sword, is the next thing on the list, which is necessity of getting good at no. Going back to the previous point, you have a lot coming at you. There's constant requests and asks, and it's a constant struggle from me personally to find the balance point of what you can fit into the schedule and produce high-quality output. But this is also a bit of a moving target too, because seasons in your life change, things in personal or other things going on change, and you might be able to take on more things at certain points in time. It's a constant moving target for, can I handle this extra thing? Yes or no? Do I think I'll be able to handle this in 3 months? It's a hard balancing act, but it also forces you to get good at drawing some lines and some boundaries and figuring out, I can reasonably take this on. I reasonably cannot take on this thing or any more things after this point. The next thing, sometimes you end up with some grueling travel, whether it is too much or there's a lot of admin that goes along with it. That gets old fast. It does have its perks. I like traveling for work, but there's a lot of other things that go along with it too. Things like exhaustion, weird sleep and eating schedules, having to book all the travel, run the expense reports. Diet and exercise is really hard to maintain when you're on the road. And then realize too that when you're traveling for business, you're traveling for work. So there's a little bit of a different mindset when you go into things. You need to still get your work done, even though you're traveling, which is often hard when you're in planes and you're in hotels and you've got weird schedules and odd meetings and things are all shaken up. You have to still fit work in there and still be getting things accomplished as well. The other thing about DevRel is it's often an orphan within an organization. This will depend on your company and the individual preferences, but advocates often end up wearing a lot of hats, and it's hard to put them under a single department umbrella. We aren't typically responsible for making sales. We are usually more technical than marketing or community teams, things like events and training and etc. We often also handle activities beyond traditional development and support. This makes us the odd duck out, but it also brings a lot of value to both internal and external audiences. Okay, there was all the bad. Now, the meh thing is mostly for me, the administration of it. And this is a necessary evil because we tend to operate in a lot of different spheres. There are some processes that end up impacting us differently than other parts of the business because we end up traveling and doing a lot of content. There's a lot of administration and rules and regulations for various external bloggers when you submit content and all sorts of odd things. Now, the good things, which is my favorite part. First of all, the good thing about this is there's so much variety. There are so many diverse opportunities for developing and educating people about technology. You also get to learn along the way to go deeper on understanding in certain topics so that you can better contribute and help others understand those things as well. It's always good to develop your own education and then to give back and share that with other developers and other technical folks. Now, I mentioned travel as a negative. It's also a positive. I get to meet a ton of different people with a variety of backgrounds and experiences who are dealing with all sorts of different developer challenges, creative ideas, and inventive solutions. It's really cool to hear the things that people are struggling with, the things they often have questions about, or the things that they've solved in a variety of different ways. And it's just really exciting and inspiring to hear their stories and their struggles and the things they're dealing with. When they have a lot of questions or I keep hearing the same question pop up from lots of different people, that tells me, hey, there's a gap here. This is something I might need to look at and see if I can understand better and help share some of the things that I've learned through those. The next thing, along with the overwhelm and the variety, is that this job is never dull. There's always something you can pick, even if you have a choice between 15 different things and you don't like 2 of them, well, then focus on high impact things that you do like. Or say you do have one thing that's high impact you don't care for, get that one thing done, and then focus on 5 other things that you love. There's a lot of things you get to choose from, and you can stack those priorities. Now, another thing I love is that I get to play to my strengths. There are some things that are absolutely required, as there are with every job, but I can tailor my content, my development, and approach to fit me, my audience, and what happens to be going on in the industry. Sometimes I have to get a little bit creative to do it because some of the topics may not be up my alley or I'm coming at it from a new perspective or something, but that also gives me a different perspective on those topics because I might have something of an outsider's look on things. But I do think that being able to play to my strengths improves the overall results for the things that I do, the content that I make. Last but not least is I get to focus my energy where I'm most impactful. I love tech blogging as an example. While I love presenting and podcasting and business travel and whatever else might go along with this job, I have a specific passion for tech blogging. And while I sometimes need to present content in other ways, I can lean in on the avenues where I'm most passionate, which comes across to audiences, right? And in my opinion, improves the success for my approach and the audience's understanding. I do have some other updates outside of developer advocacy talk, so I'll just hit those really quickly now. I'm working on an application and blog posts, hopefully plural, on Spring AI advisors. So be looking for that in the coming weeks. And then I'm also prepping for a conference, Dev2Next, next week. So if you're in the Colorado area, feel free to check that out. I will be there and I'm really excited to join the event. The content piece I want to outline today is called Cypher Conditional Queries. It's by Christopher Bergman. This is an excellent blog post. I'm a bit of a geek about data and databases. I like query languages. And one of the things that I really loved about this blog post is I learned something about what's coming out in Cypher, something we couldn't do before. But I also learned more about how Cypher works and how it's designed. First off, the article starts with that it's a declarative language, which means that imperative constructs, things like for and while loops and if constructs, aren't included. Cypher's alternatives are things like reduce and case to help provide some of those pseudo-conditional abilities. However, sometimes those traditional imperative programming language constructs, like wanting one type of processing for X and something else for Y, are cleaner and easier. So this is changing now in Cypher 25. The article walks through an existing pre-Cypher 25 example of how you would go about doing this type of processing, something like a for, while loop and if statements. And then because Cypher doesn't have the if, else, you have to process all those conditional statements every time, plus the syntax is verbose. In an if and if else, you only process one piece of that block typically, and then you drop out of the rest of it. That's not the case in Cypher because it is declarative. You have to step through all of those separate if blocks, and it goes through all of them, and that's frustrating. The new syntax is called when, then, else, and it's wrapped in a call subquery. The article walks through the new syntax with a couple of additional cleaner features from Cypher 25 to go from a 59-line query to a 51-line query. Now, that still may seem long, but when you think about maintenance and readability and looking at the two queries, it is much more improved. And you're removing 8 lines of clutter code, things that were intermediate processing or just syntax that had to be there in order to pass results on to the next thing. That all gets cleaned up, and it's much easier to read because most programmers understand those imperative constructs. Then the article tests the new syntax with the original problem, which was to reorder a linked list and move an item from one place in the list to another, maintaining all those relationships. I really loved this article because it stepped through each phase, explained along the way, and demonstrated not just the syntax update, but how or why the change is better for developers. I also appreciated the quick call out to APOC, where this capability is available, but now we have officially and hopefully nicer support within Cypher itself. Every role has its perks and slogs, but I rattled off a few of the low, mid, and high points for me about being a developer advocate. I also find query languages fascinating, and I was really excited to read Christopher Bergman's blog post on the new Cypher conditional features. Thanks for listening, and happy coding.